Burkina Faso's national gold production hits a record level at 94 tons. And Ethiopia's economic output is forecast to grow by more than 10% this year. We'll have the data and the details on those stories and lots more coming your way in the course of the hour. For now, let's start with the latest in current affairs with Richard.
Thank you so much, Rama. Once again, a very warm welcome to Africa Live. Let's begin with our top story. Chinese President Xi Jinping has held talks with Uruguayan President Yamandu Orsi in Beijing. The two presidents also attended a signing ceremony of cooperation documents. Earlier in the morning, President Xi held a welcome ceremony for the Uruguayan president, who is on his first state visit to China from February the 1st to the 7th.
In talks with Uruguayan President Yamandu Orsi, Chinese President Xi Jinping highlighted the strong friendship between their two countries, which have maintained close ties since diplomatic relations began 38 years ago. President Xi said both countries should continue to firmly support each other's core interests. He added that the two countries should strengthen exchanges at all levels, including in governance experience, and continuously deepen strategic mutual trust. President Xi said China and Uruguay should deepen their development strategy alignment and expand existing cooperation. He also called on both sides to explore cooperation potential in emerging fields such as green development, the digital economy, artificial intelligence, and clean energy to drive economic growth and transformation. President Xi said China supports Latin American and Caribbean countries in upholding their sovereignty, security, and development interests. He said China supports Uruguay in assuming the rotating presidencies of the Community of Latin American and Caribbean States and the Southern Common Market. He added that China is ready to work with Uruguay and other countries in the region to further promote the building of a China-LAC community with a shared future. President Yamandu Orsi praised China's progress under President Xi's leadership and expressed hope that the 15th five-year plan will bring even greater opportunities to the world. As Uruguay and China celebrate 38 years of diplomatic ties, Orsi described their relationship as the strongest ever. He said Uruguay sees China as a key partner for development and fully supports the One China principle. He also expressed his desire to deepen cooperation in areas such as trade, technology, the green economy, and education, bringing greater benefits to both nations. Orsi said Uruguay highly appreciates President Xi Jinping's vision of building a community with a shared future. Faced with a challenging regional and international situation, Orsi said Uruguay is committed to working with China to uphold the UN principles, support multilateral trade, strengthen Latin America-China ties, and protect the interests of the Global South. After the talks, the two heads of state witnessed the signing of more than 10 cooperation documents in fields such as investment promotion and trade. Xi Jinping also hosted a welcome banquet for Orsi in the Golden Hall of the Great Hall of the People. During the visit, the two sides issued a joint statement on deepening their comprehensive strategic partnership.
China and Uruguay have issued a joint statement on deepening the China-Uruguay Comprehensive Strategic Partnership. The two sides expressed their willingness to advance cooperation in areas such as industry and investment, energy, food security, manufacturing, sustainable mining, emergency management, artificial intelligence, and the digital economy. The statement noted that China is Uruguay's main trading partner, with both sides agreeing to expand and diversify trade. The two countries also agreed to deepen cooperation under the China-CELAC Forum and jointly build a China-Latin American community with a shared future. China unveiled its #1 central document for 2026 on Tuesday, outlining plans to advance agricultural and rural modernization and to promote all-round rural revitalization. As the first policy statement released by China's central authorities each year, the document is seen as an indicator of policy priorities. The guideline calls for upholding the Communist Party of China's leadership over work concerning agriculture, rural areas, and farmers, prioritizing their development and promoting integrated urban-rural growth to advance modernization. It stresses safeguarding national food security, enhancing policies that benefit farmers, consolidating poverty alleviation achievements, and raising standards in rural industry, construction, and governance. The document says the goal is to build modern agriculture, improve rural living conditions, and increase farmers' incomes and well-being. To enhance productivity and quality, the document calls for stabilizing grain and oil output, upgrading the vegetable basket project, strengthening farmland protection and quality improvement, boosting agricultural research and development, improving disaster prevention systems, and promoting a coordinated agricultural sector. It also emphasizes targeting assistance for less developed regions, steady income growth for farmers, expanding rural industries and consumption, improving rural infrastructure and public services, and also advancing rural livability and ecology, and strengthening grassroots party organizations to ensure implementation. China's agricultural and rural development continued its steady and positive momentum in 2025. Grain production reached a record high of 715 billion kilograms, an increase of over 8 billion kilograms despite drought, floods, and prolonged rain. It's China's second consecutive year of grain output above the 700 billion kilo mark. Soybean output remained stable at nearly 21 million metric tons. The livestock sector was steady. Output of pork, beef, mutton, and poultry rose from a year ago to over 4% to over 100 million metric tons in 2025. Production capacity for cotton, sugar, and rubber improved as well. Supplies of meat, eggs, dairy, fruits, vegetables, tea, and aquatic products remained abundant and diverse. The qualifying rate for routine monitoring of agricultural products reached 98%. The U.S. and Iran are set to hold nuclear talks on Friday in Istanbul. U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi are due to meet. Representatives from Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and other nations will also participate. Iran says it's reviewing the details of the negotiations. In a post on social media platform X, President Pezeshkian said Tuesday he has instructed Araghchi, to pursue fair and equitable negotiations, provided that a suitable environment exists free from threats and unreasonable expectations. Meanwhile, the U.S. continues to boost its naval deployments near Iran. The Chief of Staff of Iran's armed forces says Tehran is fully prepared to counter any military provocation. Araghchi says Tehran remains open to diplomacy, stressing talks must be based on mutual respect. Our correspondent Ehsan Kiavani has been speaking to us about what we can expect ahead of Friday's talks between U.S. and Iranian officials. Let's take a listen.
The talks will be held on Friday in Istanbul between the Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi and the United States Special Envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff. Iran's Foreign Ministry says the negotiations will be held in several phases, emphasizing that for Iran, the removal of sanctions is the top priority. Meanwhile, Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian says he has instructed Foreign Minister Araghchi to pursue fair and equitable negotiations, adding that any talks must be guided by the principles of dignity, prudence, and expediency, and conducted strictly within the framework of Iran's national interest. In a separate reaction, Ali Shamkhani, the former Secretary of Iran's Supreme National Security and the current advisor to the Supreme Leader, says if the United States attacks Iran, Tehran will definitely strike Israel. He also added that there is no reason to transfer enriched materials outside of Iran, and international concerns about the existence of these materials can be resolved.
Separately, a massive fire caused clouds of black smoke to billow across a busy road in Tehran on Tuesday. Firefighters and other emergency workers were deployed to put out the blaze at the Janat Bazaar. The popular market in western Tehran has shops and stalls covering 2,000 square meters. The cause remains unclear, and there have been no reports of casualties. A spokesperson for the Tehran Fire Department, Jalal Maleki, said some 150 to 200 shops and stalls were severely damaged. U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff is expected in Israel Tuesday for talks with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Discussions will reportedly focus on the second phase of the Gaza ceasefire deal and tensions with Iran. In Gaza, thousands of sick and wounded Palestinians are still waiting to leave for urgent medical care abroad after Israel opened the Rafah border crossing with Egypt for limited transfers. The crossing standing amid rubble and ruins is a lifeline for nearly all of Gaza's more than 2 million residents. It had been closed since Israel took control of it in May 2024. The limited reopening is fraught with restrictions, security hurdles, and screenings, and is one of the requirements agreed upon in the U.S. brokered ceasefire deal reached last October.
Actually, Jamie, the medical evacuation resumed today, the second day of the reopening of the Rafah crossing terminal. 45 Palestinian patients, as well as 90 of their escorts, were able to cross into the Rafah crossing terminal earlier on Tuesday, today actually. This number is much bigger than the number that was able to leave yesterday. Only 5 were able to leave actually from the Gaza Strip into Rafah crossing terminal on ways to the hospitals outside of the Gaza Strip, with medical situation is very critical here in the territory. More than 18,000 Palestinian patients and injured ones who are critically ill and critically injured need urgent medical care out of the territory. This situation is very complicated for the population, as the reopening of the Rafah crossing terminal itself is not that enough for them. That's the population's reactions to the reopening of the crossing, and also the restrictions that have been imposed on the reopening itself by the Israeli authorities. Now the observers, European observers, some Palestinian officials, and also people were able to return, just limited number of people returning to Gaza through the Rafah crossing terminal. As estimates suggest, there are more than 20,000 Palestinians stranded in Egypt and other parts of the Arab world since the war has since the war has erupted in October 2023. That's the situation, Jamie, for the time being.
Sudan's Army Chief Abdel Fattah al-Burhan says government forces have broken a long-running siege by the Rapid Support Forces on Kadugli, the South Kordofan state capital. Speaking to state television, al-Burhan congratulated residents on what he called the reopening of the road to the city and the arrival of Army troops. 2 Army sources also told AFP that forces had entered Kadugli and lifted the siege. The RSF, who have been battling the military since April 2023, did not immediately comment. Kadugli and nearby Dilling have faced severe shortages, with the UN previously warning of famine conditions. The conflict between the Army and the RSF has created what aid agencies describe as one of the world's worst humanitarian crises, killing tens of thousands and forcing millions from their homes.
Congratulations the people of Kadugli on the liberation of the city. The armed forces will reach any place in Sudan. There is no truce that strengthens the enemy, no ceasefire that allows this militia to get back on its feet again.
Staying in Sudan, the Army and the RSF exchanged strikes in the western and southern regions of the country on Monday, and that's according to a Sudanese military source and eyewitnesses. A drone strike hit the town of Dilling in South Kordofan state, where the Army recently broke a siege by the RSF. The strike hit a building housing the government's humanitarian aid agency. Dilling and Kadugli have been on the front lines of fighting since 2023. Around 80% of the population, some 147,000 people, have fled Kadugli, according to the UN. U.S. diplomat reportedly pushing a new initiative during a permanent ceasefire in Sudan by the end of March. We spoke to political analyst Edmund Yakani on his thoughts about these developments. Let's listen in.
But this move, it will yield results, or it will be something tangible if Sudanese politicians at their divide conflicting positions can accept the initiative and can demonstrate the will and the commitment to respond to the interests of U.S. or to the solidarity shown by the leadership of U.S. to ensure that peace and stability prevail. Need not to have a deadlines, but sometimes you need to embrace deadlines to win commitment. So I think the deadlines from U.S. perspective is mainly to push the warring parties in Sudan to commit themselves for something tangible against the deadline set by U.S. But for the proposal to succeed, I wish U.S. can be as much as inclusive that can bring everybody on board, specifically Sudanese stakeholders who pay the brunt of the pain that is associated with the ongoing violence. To what level are they involved? How inclusive is it? And secondly, is the interest behind this proposal really responding to the priorities of Sudanese needs, or is it respond to the interests of U.S. that may not be the interest of Sudanese in terms of peace and stability? So the question comes, how much inclusive is the process, and to what level are the process being coordinated, shared, and how much have interest of various actors been accomplished or been accommodated by the U.S. proposal? For me, that's the point of success. Without meeting those requirements, those standards, the chances that this process may die like other previous process is very high.
Time now for a short break. We shall reset and return with more Africa Live. Here's what's ahead. Coming up, drug shortages threaten leprosy control in the eastern DRC. Welcome back to Africa Live. Thanks for staying with us. The UN peacekeeping mission in the Democratic Republic of the Congo is preparing to deploy its first ceasefire monitoring team in the coming days, and that's according to Qatar's foreign ministry. The team is expected to go to Uvira, a strategic city in the east that was recently retaken by government forces after M23 rebels withdrew. Qatar says both sides have agreed on terms for the monitoring mechanism under a previous ceasefire deal, signaling progress in Doha-mediated negotiations. Separate U.S.-led talks between the DRC and Rwanda are also underway. This latest push to activate ceasefire monitoring comes amid persistent fighting in the east, which has faced decades of conflict, causing ongoing instability and a worsening humanitarian crisis. Our correspondent Chris Ochemringa has more from Kinshasa.
The spokesperson of the United Nations peacekeeping mission in the DRC confirmed the deployment of UN peacekeepers in the eastern city of Uvira in the coming days. She said that they are carrying out preparations to deploy the troops and declined to divulge more details about, the duration and the operations, how it will be going on. But what we know is that the peacekeepers will be deployed there to protect civilians, which is their core mandate. Last month when M23 rebels were pulling out of that city after getting a lot of pressure from the United States, they wrote a letter to the United Nations Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, asking him to send a neutral force to protect civilians in that area, particularly the Tutsi community known as Banyamulenge, who they said were at risk of being attacked by the Wazalendo militia, who are a group that has been fighting alongside the DRC army. but the DRC dismissed that allegation, saying that they are not targeting any civilians in Uvira. They are only fighting against the M23 rebels who have illegally occupied territories in eastern DRC, as well as the Rwandan forces, despite UN Security Council resolution known as 2773, which called on them to stop their offensive and the Rwandan soldiers to withdraw from Congolese territory. So we're expecting the United Nations peacekeeping mission to make a statement about how this deployment will be carried out in the next coming days. Authorities in Kinshasa are very supportive about this deployment. So any kind of assistance, support by the international community is very welcome in the DRC to end this conflict. So many people are hoping that this deployment will restore peace in eastern DRC. We're waiting to see how it turns out.
Staying in the DRC, leprosy, though curable, continues to spread fear and exclusion in Oicha in the east. Prolonged shortages of anti-leprosy drugs, compounded by insecurity linked to Islamic State-aligned Allied Democratic Forces attacks, are leaving patients abandoned and raising fears of renewed transmission within this isolated community. CGTN Sharon Baranga reports.
In the Beni territory of North Kivu province in the small town of Oicha, leprosy does more than damage the body. It isolates and stigmatizes those who suffer from it. Today, patients are speaking out, denouncing what they describe as a double punishment, social rejection, and the prolonged absence of life-saving medication. At the Mbimbi Leprosarium, 28 people living with leprosy receive free care. But for more than a year, essential medicines have been unavailable, putting recovery out of reach.
Today I feel a little better. When I arrived here, I had deformities and moved on my bottom like a child. Now I have managed to stand again and walk with crutches.
Despite the fact that leprosy is fully curable, stigma remains widespread. Fataki Kapitula from Ituri province has been in treatment for nearly 5 years. The Bimbi Center restored his hope, but the interruption of medication now threatens that progress.
This disease drains all your strength. After treatment, I regained energy, but now the medicine is out of stock. New patients are no longer treated here. They are transferred somewhere else.
Since 2025, the Leprosarium has faced a complete shortage of anti-leprosy drugs. After M23 rebels took Goma last year, the situation has gotten worse. Health workers say they are now forced to refer patients outside the country, an option many families cannot afford.
Since the capture of Goma Airport, we have had serious supply difficulties. Patients had to stop treatment. New cases are diagnosed and referred to Uganda. Already in 2026, we've recorded one such transfer.
Health workers warn that without urgent support, the consequences could be severe. Leprosy, they say, is no longer just a medical issue, but a growing public health emergency.
We risk a resurgence of cases, even an epidemic we won't be able to control. There are clearly hidden cases in the community, but without medicines or resources, we are powerless.
Only 28 patients are currently being treated at the Bimbi Leprosarium, thanks to early screening and decentralized care. Founded in 1950, once among the world's largest leprosy centers, Bimbi now stands as a symbol of progress and a threat, as conflict and shortages jeopardize decades of gains. Sharon Baranga, CGTN.
At least 80 Christian worshippers who were earlier believed to have been kidnapped have returned home, according to police and a local leader. On January 18th, gunmen stormed 3 churches in Kaduna State and seized 177 congregants. Local officials said 11 people later escaped, leaving 166 missing. A Kaduna police spokesperson said fresh inquiries showed 80 of those reported missing had escaped to nearby villages during the attack, returning home when they thought it was safe. The abductions were the latest in a wave of kidnappings targeting both Christians and Muslims in Nigeria. Over 2,500 digital content creators from 15 countries converged on Lagos, Nigeria for this year's African Creators Summit. Under the theme, Building a Sustainable Ecosystem Where Africa Trades Its Swag, they called for their craft to be recognized as a full-time venture and not just a side hustle. CGTN's Wilkerson Yabo has more.
In a world of rapid digital and technological advances, content creation has evolved by leaps and bounds. And at the African Creators Summit in Lagos, these creatives highlighted the overarching demands of their craft.
If you look at, as a content creator, having to work with like multiple platforms, like 4 or 5 platforms joined together, having to post on different platforms, create videos for different platforms. I feel like it's not something that you can just say, oh, let me be doing this and also be doing content creation also. It's not possible. You have to like put your whole mind, effort, you have to put everything into content creating. And if you look at it, anything that pays can be called a job.
Others stress that content creators should think of themselves as small business owners.
About 40% of creators still think of it as a side hustle, and that is one of the reasons why the industry is not as mature as it is. So the industry has to get to a point where creators believe that this is something that they can do full-time. And so I believe within the next few years, you're going to see more people who are doing this thing full-time as their main job. They will quit their 9-to-5s and focus on this, because again, this is like building a small business.
They also called for the monetization of their art. As part of the theme, swag stands for sound, walk, attire and grabs, which they said form the cultural pillars behind the continent's growing global influence.
Content creation has helped me to pay a lot of bills, and it also helped me to see it in the light of as a career, as a long-time journey, because there are a lot of things about content creation. Some people just see that getting in front of the camera, acting and all that. There are scriptwriters, videographers, editors, sound guy, and producers.
The summit also focused on sustainability within the industry, with speakers highlighting different levels of creators and the challenges of moving into top earning brackets.
The top tier is where everybody's trying to get to, right? They say you want to be that person that your content feeds you. But if you do your life right, your life is the content. The work you do is part of the content. For me, I'm into sports, right? At my core, I'm a sports journalist, but most of the content I get to reproduce comes from a sports, entertainment, and educative space. So if I am not doing these things already, where would the content come from?
The African content creator economy has grown rapidly in recent years, driven by social media, video streaming, and increased mobile phone use across the continent. Wilkerson Yabo, CGTN.
Angola and China have marked the Lunar New Year with a major cultural celebration in Angola's capital, Luanda, highlighting growing people-to-people ties. A Chinese New Year temple fair drew thousands as officials from both countries pointed to deeper cultural cooperation in the year ahead. CGTN's Joy Kuruki Juma has more.
Color, music and tradition filled the streets of Luanda as a Chinese Lunar New Year temple fair brought together cultures from across continents. The 2-day weekend event was co-hosted by the Chinese Embassy in Angola and the Incombota municipal government of Luanda province. It drew nearly 10,000 people, including members of the Chinese community, Angolan residents and visitors from different walks of life. Guests were treated to Chinese cultural performances and traditional foods, with many saying the fair offered a close look at Lunar New Year customs. Chinese ambassador to Angola, Zhang Bin, noted that 2026 has been designated the China-Africa Year of People-to-People exchanges. He described the temple fair as the first cultural event under that to people links. Organizers and participants alike expressed hope that cultural activities like this will continue, strengthening mutual understanding as ties between the two countries grow. Joy Kirukijuma, CGTN.
A Chinese New Year's parade also lit up the heart of Paris on Sunday as the Champs-Élysées transformed into a corridor of color, rhythm, and celebration. Organized by the China National Tourist Office in Paris, the event drew local residents and international visitors alike to welcome in the Year of the Horse. Let's check it out.
In the Year of the Horse parade, around 600 performers marched in an orderly procession through downtown Paris, spreading the cheer of the Spring Festival through the French capital. Among the performers were dragon and lion dancers, as well as folk dancers dressed in striking costumes and moving in powerful rhythm to the beat of the drums. The Han-Fu displays showcased the diversity of Chinese sartorial traditions. Spectators lined both sides of the avenue, applauding and cheering as some groups returned for encores.
We came this afternoon just to watch the parade. It's wonderful to see so many aspects of Chinese culture and all the small details on display.
Adding a modern twist to the celebrations, a robot developed by a Chinese technology company joined the procession. Blending tradition with innovation, the parade offered Paris a lively taste of the Chinese New Year, turning one of the world's most famous streets into a bridge between cultures.
Rama's in the studio, and that means it's time for our business segment. Over to you, Rama.
Thank you very much, Richard. Unfortunately, I don't have the ability to dance like that, but I do have the business news. Here's what's coming up. Burkina Faso's national gold production hits a record level at 94 tons. And Ethiopia's economy is forecast to grow by more than 10% this year. Let's start in West Africa. Burkina Faso's mining sector delivered a historic performance in 2025. National gold production there hit a record 94 tons. According to official figures presented by the Minister of Energy, Mines and Quarries, the output, which includes industrial production, artisanal mining and state seizures, that went up by more than 30 tons year on year. That marks one of the strongest annual performances in the country's mining sector. Yakuba Zabreguba reported an 89.66% achievement rate under the ministry's performance contract. The gains largely stem from mining sector reforms anchored in economic sovereignty. Now, the minister attributed the surge to the operationalization of the state-owned Burkina Faso mining participation firm and tighter oversight of the country's 15 industrial mines. Government efforts to clamp down on illegal gold trading also did yield results, with authorities recovering roughly 10 kilograms of gold from illicit supply chains in the course of the year. Now, over in Ghana, another large gold producer on the continent, the finance minister has offered to cut a mining levy by 2 percentage points to help push through a new gold royalty regime that mining companies say could deter investment inflows. Africa's top gold producer wants to replace its flat royalty rate with a sliding scale, anywhere between 5% to 12%, in order to capture a lot more values depending on where prices stand. The new gold royalty regime is similar to the system in Burkina Faso, and it adds about 1 percentage point for every $500 increase in the price of gold. It will take effect later in February unless Parliament amends it. Ghana's gold mining companies, however, want that rate reduced. The GSL was doubled to 3% last year. Producers refused to pay but later complied, while talks on the review did continue. African leaders are calling for rapid industrialization to achieve the goals of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. Business leaders and policymakers in the Ghanaian capital, Accra, were there for this year's Africa Trade Summit. They explored how African economies can move beyond just exporting raw materials and to build competitive industrial value chains. CGTN's Nabil Ahmed Rufai was there.
The African Continental Free Trade Agreement, or AFCFTA, is in its 5th year of operation. The agreement aims to open the market for 1.3 billion people on the continent for cross-border trade. But 5 years on, some analysts are concerned that not much has been achieved.
We've still not witnessed much when it comes to services, and it's of great concern services under AFCFTA. And that carries the bulk of the money. That carries the bulk of where the Secretariat can do well, or the agreement can do well.
The trade summit held in Accra sought to find ways to step up implementation of the Continental Free Trade Agreement.
We can no longer accept an economic model that consigns Africa to exporting raw materials and importing finished goods. That model is a neo-colonial arrangement that is designed to trap Africa in perpetual poverty. It is important for Africa to industrialize.
But there are also concerns about the lack of trade financing, especially for small and medium-sized enterprises to scale up their production. Another issue analysts want governments in Africa to tackle is the growing insecurity on the continent, especially in West Africa.
If you look at this last year, still a lot of volumes were not made with respect to the AFCFTA trading, because we had a lot of instability in some of the regions. You recall, the Burkina Faso and the likes. And so you realize that a lot of intra-trade was a bit short-circuited.
Leaders at the trade summit now want to mobilize financing for industrialization to boost intra-trade. They believe this could help lift millions of people on the continent out of poverty. Nabil Ahmed Rufai, CGTN, Accra, Ghana.
On to the Horn of Africa now. Ethiopia's economy is forecast to grow by over 10% in the 2025-2026 fiscal year. That's higher than the Finance Ministry's initial forecast of 8.9% back in June 2025. The Prime Minister, Abiy Ahmed, says that's based on a review of the growth performance over the last 6 months of the current fiscal year. Now, Ethiopia is currently in the process of restructuring its external commercial debt, and it's implementing a range of economic reforms backed by an International Monetary Fund loan program. In the meantime, a key investor group in Ethiopia's Seoul International Bond says it plans to take legal action after the country's bilateral creditors blocked an initial agreement with the government on how to restructure that outstanding $1 billion Eurobond. Last week, Ethiopia announced it would reopen talks with investors on the terms of restructuring that note. That came after the official creditors committee chaired by China and France said the draft deal did not meet the comparability of treatment principle under the G20 restructuring initiative. Sudan Airways has completed its first flight to Khartoum International Airport since the outbreak of the civil war there, offering tickets at reduced prices. In a statement, it said the first flight from Port Sudan to the airport in Khartoum, the country's capital, was a reflection of a return of spirit and continued connection between the people of the nation. Now, the carrier says that the flight was offered at promotional rates of $50 as part of a commitment to serving citizens and easing travel costs. Sudan Airways resumed flights to the Egyptian capital, Cairo, and Jeddah in Saudi Arabia on the 20th of January, flying out of Port Sudan International Airport after finishing maintenance in India on its only aircraft. It does continue, however, to face significant challenges. That includes the loss of most of its fleet and a ban on flights over European Union airspace. The carrier also faces administrative and financial challenges and technical constraints too that have affected its competitiveness and overall reputation.
We announced the commencement of operations at Khartoum Airport with sufficient capacity for this phase, and we assure all citizens, airlines and stakeholders in the aviation sector in Sudan that we are ready to carry out our operation tasks from Khartoum Airport so that we can fulfill the assigned role in serving the Sudanese traveller and the Sudanese economy.
Now the airport is 100% ready to receive all internal flights, and soon it will be ready to receive international airlines as well. The extent of the damage at the airport is huge. We're talking about big and unimaginable numbers that cannot be easily calculated in an accurate way.
It's such a beautiful and wonderful feeling. We can't believe what happened. We can't believe the Sudanese carrier is back and we are on board here to Khartoum, and we wish everyone the best of luck.
Onto the eastern end of the Democratic Republic of Congo. There's a vital lifeline there that's coming back to life ever since the army retook South Kivu's city of Uvira after M23 rebels withdrew from that area. For nearly 2 months, the port was closed to traffic, but now boats are docking once again at the key port of Kalundu on Lake Tanganyika. CGTN's Najma Abdurizak explores what this means for communities that depend on this port.
The port of Kalundu is South Kivu's main connection to the outside world. But for more than 30 days, the port has stood virtually paralyzed. No boats, empty quays, and trade frozen, leaving hundreds of workers in forced unemployment. But in recent days, vessels have begun docking once again as traffic gradually returns to the waters.
This is the official reopening of traffic on Lake Tanganyika between Uvira and Kalemie, Uvira and Bujumbura, Uvira and Kigoma, and Uvira and Mpulungu. I can confirm that traffic has begun and work is already underway. From Kalundu, you can access Bujumbura. You can also access Kigoma in Tanzania, and from there you can go to Mpulungu in Zambia.
Uvira's economy is opening up along with the port. Weeks of closure left markets empty and desperate, driving up prices and squeezing families. The city depends heavily on lake traffic for everyday essentials, from food and fuel to building materials. For port workers, the blare of boat engines is a welcome sound after months of instability.
A boat arrived today from Kalemie, the El Shaddai. That's why I had the courage to come to the port to do the work that feeds my family. We no longer believed we would see a boat dock here at this state port, but God is good, and He allowed our soldiers to return here to Uvira and liberate the people of Uvira from the rebels. We praise God.
There are small boats that come here. Each week we might see 5 or 6, and sometimes even 10, coming to sell their products. During the time the rebels were here, there was no traffic, and the port was closed. So there was no way for these boats to come in. There are also ships that dock, but they couldn't come in either. Why? Because there was no traffic. They couldn't come because traffic on the lake was closed.
Kalundu's return signals a small but vital step towards stability in eastern DRC and a relief for the communities that depend heavily on cross-border trade. Najma Abdirazak, CGTN.
Now then, on to a story outside the continent. The US and India have agreed to a trade deal which effectively cuts US tariffs on Indian imports to 18% from 50%. The American President Donald Trump announced the deal after a phone call with the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. In exchange, India will stop buying Russian crude oil and it will lower trade barriers with the United States. Donald Trump says India will buy oil from the US and potentially from Venezuela too. Modi thanked Trump. He called calling it a deal that unlocks immense opportunities for mutually beneficial cooperation. A White House official told Reuters that the US is rescinding a punitive 25% duty on Indian imports over its purchase of Russian oil, which was added on top of a 25% so-called reciprocal tariff rate. Now, leading Indian industry leaders have welcomed the breakthrough in India-US bilateral trade ties following months of tariff-related tensions between the two sides. The announcement on Monday came after months of bilateral talks. Both countries are expected to issue a joint statement on the precise details of the agreement.
It will help to build better relations with the US. That is one thing. The second thing is import-export. The goods that are coming in and the tariffs being imposed on products are at 18%. Before, I thought the US was a bit rigid about this, but later they reduced it to 18%. So I think that will be helpful for business people. And yes, the startups will also get good support.
It is quite welcoming change for India because, and it is coming just after mother of all deal with a European trade which recently has happened. So we can think Trump is in back foot after that deal, and the rate cut has been offered. So India trade with the US I think was good enough, okay, and India was kind of balancing with the European nations and other subcontinents, the kind of trade which we had with the US.
Right, then on to a really interesting deal in the M&A world. Elon Musk has announced that SpaceX has acquired a company he also owns, his artificial intelligence startup XAI, in a record-setting deal that essentially unifies Elon Musk's AI and space ambitions by combining the rocket, defense and satellite firm with the maker of the Grok chatbot. Now, the deal was first reported by Reuters last week, and it represents one of the most ambitious tie-ups in the tech sector yet. It combines a space contractor with a fast-growing AI developer whose costs are largely driven by the need to invest and to buy up processors, data centers and energy. That transaction values SpaceX at $1 trillion and XAI at $250 billion. Now, this could also potentially bolster SpaceX's data center ambitions, as Musk is competing with key rivals like Alphabet's Google, Meta, Amazon-backed Anthropic, and OpenAI in that AI sector. And finally, Disney shares took a bit of a dive on Monday, despite the company's fiscal first quarter revenues actually beating forecasts. Two smash hit movies and bigger profits from its streaming services were offset by concerns about the impact of the U.S. political climate on visitors and their spending to Disney's theme parks. Juan Fairclough tells us more.
From Avatar 3 to Zootopia 2, two Disney movies that gross more than $1 billion and help propel the company's first earnings of 2026.
Partnership is the cornerstone of success. Carrots!
The Zootopia sequel broke box office records internationally, including in China, where it's the highest grossing Hollywood movie ever released. And that kind of milestone helped Disney's first quarter revenues grow 5% to $26 billion. Streaming income grew by 72%, partly driven by higher subscription fees. And its experiences division that includes theme parks and merchandise generated a record $10 billion. But if those headline numbers look good, Disney's overall profitability is down. Its share price dived in New York on Monday as investors digested modest income growth for its US parks due to what Disney calls international visitation headwinds. In other words, fewer people visiting the US amid international backlash over the Trump administration's immigration policies, now embodied by deadly protests in Minneapolis. That arguably increases the value of overseas markets like China. And during his visit there last month, Disney chief executive Bob Iger pledged continuing investment. Owen Fairclough, CGTN, Washington.
And we'll be there for the timing, but here's what's coming up at the top of the hour. In global business, we'll be focusing on Tanzania. It's hosting the first edition of the African Conference on Sustainable Agricultural Mechanization. What exactly is the outcome that you can expect from that event, and plenty more? We'll explore that at the top of the hour. See you at 1800 GMT. For now, though, back to Richard for the sport.
Thank you so much, Rama. And we're not done just yet. We've got your sports segment coming up after the break. Let's take a look at those headlines. Well, coming up in sports, World Rugby releases the fixtures for the 2027 Rugby World Cup in Australia.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Well, welcome into Sport on Africa Live with me, Richard Nta. Let's talk a bit of rugby, shall we? Host Australia will kick off the 2027 Rugby World Cup against debutantes Hong Kong in Perth on October the 1st, with the final scheduled for Sydney on November the 13th. World Rugby released the fixtures for the biggest ever tournament on Tuesday. South Africa will begin their bid for a third successive title against Italy in Adelaide on October the 3rd, before playing Georgia and Romania. England, who won the World Cup the last time it was in Australia in 2003, start against Tonga in Brisbane on October the 2nd and then face Zimbabwe and Wales. The expanded 2014 World Cup will feature 52 matches across 19 match days in 7 cities, with a shortened pool stage but a new knockout round of 16.
Together, we have delivered a schedule built on fairness, global impact and accessibility. It is, without question, the most compelling Rugby World Cup match schedule ever created. So the stage is now set. Pre-sales open on the 18th of February, with tickets available across every match and category, Fans everywhere will soon have the chance to experience what will be the unmissable sporting event of 2027.
And in English football, Chelsea's new manager, Liam Rosenior, will be facing Arsenal in the second leg of the English League Cup at the Emirates Stadium on Tuesday night. His side comes into the fixture trailing 3-2 after losing the first leg at Stamford Bridge, but they are currently on a sort of run, should I say, of form after winning 6 of their last 7 games that Rosenior has managed. The Gunners will, however, be no pushovers as they are aiming to get to a first cup finals in 6 years and haven't lost to Chelsea since the 2020-2021 season.
Yeah, the reality is Arsenal are favourites for the tie. They're a goal up and they're at home, so they'll expect to go through. We need to take it as far as we can and as deep as we can, and then the second half hopefully will be massive in terms of turning the tie around.
Well, first of all, because you work to win major trophies and the enjoyment that brings, then, as you said, the confidence, the trust, the belief, and unlock something on you, and then you want more. And it's a cycle that you want to repeat constantly, and we still have to do that, and some of them, they never done it, so it's always the first time.
And to the Saudi Pro League we go. A Sadio Mane goal was enough for an Al Nassr side missing star striker Cristiano Ronaldo to overcome Al Riyadh. The Portuguese superstar was reportedly on strike, according to Portuguese media, over a dispute with club owners, Saudi Arabia's public investment fund, over transfer strategy. But Al Nassr still cemented their second-place spot on the table with the victory over their city rivals. The game had 3 disallowed goals, all for offsides, with Mane's goal being the difference. Ronaldo's stance elicited mixed reactions, though, from Al Nassr fans after the match.
What Cristiano Ronaldo did, we stand with him. This is what a good leader does. If he didn't take actions like this, the problems with the fund's management and the club's management wouldn't be addressed. What he did will help resolve the issues related to the fund's management. This is a form of protest, and we support him as a leader. We stand behind Cristiano and say to him, keep going, we are with you.
If we look at it from a professional standpoint, it could be considered an unethical move. But in the end, he did it for the benefit of his club. Hopefully, things will calm down, and we wish Saudi Arabia and the Saudi League all the best.
An Italian biathlete, Rebecca Passler, has been suspended after testing positive for banned substances days before the start of the Milano Cortina Winter Olympics. The Italian anti-doping agency said in a statement that the 24-year-old had tested positive for letrozole and methanol. This is the first positive test of an athlete since national teams have started arriving in the northern Italian city for the February 6th start of the Games. Passler, whose best result was 11th in the women's 4x6-kilometer relay at the 2024 IBU World Championships, now faces disqualification from her home Olympics and potentially a lengthy ban.
Well, the ITA, the International Testing Agency, would probably refer the case to the CAS anti-doping division for a decision as to whether the athlete should be provisionally suspended or not. That would be the only question put. But obviously the athlete has a right to request the analysis of the B sample, so it may take 1 or 2 days until we get the case. And the lab must also give the documentation to the ITA. So technically ITA comes to us for a question or request to determine whether the athlete should be suspended for the duration of the Games or not. The CAS-ADD will not decide to impose a suspension. This is something that the Federation should decide if there is a judgment of guilt. So we deal only with the problematic for the Games.
International Olympic Committee President Kirsty Coventry has told her members that the Games governing body must remain neutral on geopolitics in her address to the 145th IOC session in Milan on Tuesday. It comes days before the opening of the Milano Cortina 2026 Winter Olympics that have been overshadowed by rising international tensions over preparation for the 2028 Summer Olympics in Los Angeles. She told the audience convening at the Teatro alla Scala in Milan that sport must remain neutral.
We are a sports organization. We understand politics, and we know we don't operate in a vacuum. But our game is sport. That means keeping sport a neutral ground, a place where every athlete can compete freely without being held back by the politics or divisions of their governments. In a world that is increasingly divided, this principle matters more than ever.
Well, that is it for this edition of Africa Live. Remember, you can send us your feedback to the contacts on the screen and follow us on digital media platforms. For the team, I'm Richard Nta saying thank you so much for watching. Up next is Global Biz with Rama. So stay tuned and stay here on CGTN.